Before we jump into today's episode, a quick note to say that open wide conversations are for interest only. We don't provide medical or clinical advice or legal or employee relations advice. Please do consult with a qualified healthcare professional if you have specific concerns related to your mental health or any medical conditions. Open Wide is recorded on the land of the Bunurong people. We acknowledge the richness and diversity of Indigenous communities and the wisdom of storytelling that has been passed down from generation to generation. We pay our respects to elders past and present. Hi, I'm Natalie Phillips-Mason, and this is the Open Wired podcast. Through respectful curiosity, we have candid conversations that explore human diversity and how to create inclusive ecosystems for all minds, bodies, and identities. My guests are change makers who are doing the practical, often unglamorous work to make inclusion real. We are streaming on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and YouTube. Today, I'm exploring the Hidden Disabilities Sunflower with Head of Hidden Disabilities Sunflower Australia, New Zealand, Sandee Facy. Hi, Sandee, and welcome.
Hi, Natalie. Thank you.
So we've just realised that we met 5 years ago, 2021. And actually, I remember what prompted me connecting with you is a family member came home with a sunflower lanyard. So we'd come out of COVID, it was maybe up to a year later. This family member came home with a lanyard, started talking to me about the program. I hadn't really heard much about it because it wasn't probably around as broad as it is today. And I was just fascinated and I loved everything it stood for. And I loved particularly that emotional connection of having someone in my family that felt that it was a great tool for them. We connected and I don't think we ever stopped talking after that. So
a few coffees here and there too.
So it's really nice to actually get one of our conversations recorded. I think this program is amazing and I would love for people to hear from you what it's been like being involved in it and what your experience has been in terms of how the program is making impact. It probably makes sense for us to then start with, tell us a little bit in your words how the Sunflower Program actually began.
Great. Thanks, Natalie. And I'd just like to acknowledge what a change maker you are.
Oh, thank you.
And I really do appreciate the fact that we have this ongoing support of one another. The Hidden Disabilities Sunflower Program or initiative was launched back in 2016 at Gatwick Airport in London. The airport staff that was an inclusion and accessibility team recognized the fact that they felt quite confident approaching people that perhaps may need some extra support and assistance that perhaps had a walking device or a seeing eye dog, etc. And then what they soon recognized was that there were passengers that had disabilities and conditions that weren't immediately visible or obvious, and often required additional support, patience, and understanding when they were traveling. So the challenge was finding a simple, voluntary way for people to discreetly indicate that they may need a little bit more support or help or assistance without having to repeatedly explain their circumstances. So the sunflower was chosen simply because it brings joy, right? Like you look at the sunflower and it makes you happy just looking at the sunflowers follow the sun. But it's also positive, visible, approachable. What began as a local initiative then there in Gatwick has improved and grown as a global movement. It helps make inclusion visible across communities, workplaces, and public spaces.
And so talk to us about how it's evolved. So you've mentioned that it was local. We know, I know a lot about the program and how far it's spread. Inclusive Change are a proud corporate partner. But for organisations that haven't yet come across it, how has it evolved and what are the sectors that you see are adopting it? In every change program, we have early adopters and we have organisations that are later in adoption. So talk to us about how it's grown.
Yeah, so it expanded from a single airport initiative to a global initiative that spans over 20 countries plus. It arrived on the shores of Australia. I know I sound like I just arrived onto the shores, but I've actually lived in Melbourne for close to 20 years and proudly an Aussie citizen. And I work for a lovely not-for-profit here in Melbourne called Bailey House. And Bailey House is celebrating its 75th year as a NDIS provider supporting the dreams and aspirations of adults with intellectual disabilities. So back in 2019, 2010, Bailey House discovered the Sunflower Initiative via someone flying from Australia to Scotland, believe it or not. And they identified the initiative, reached out and said, look, we'd be really interested in becoming a distributor, support your efforts here in Australia and in New Zealand. After a process of consideration, Hidden Disabilities in the UK decided to provide Bailey House with the stewardship of the program, which makes it quite unique too, because anywhere else in the world, it is a commercial business. Here in Australia and in New Zealand, feel confident that when you are involved with the program, that it's not only supporting people out in the community with non-visible disabilities or perhaps even employees in your workplace, but it's also supporting the Bailey House clients and their programs, etc. So it expanded via airports, but now the program's used through public transport, healthcare and hospitals, which we have proudly. We have a healthcare cohort, Sunflower cohort, that gathers and shares information across the country in New Zealand, banking and financial services, education and universities, retail and shopping centers, which I know you and I have had some really wonderful, in-depth, insightful information around retail and complexities of that environment. Like an airport, it's a complex environment. Entertainment venues, government agencies, tourism and hospitality, and also sporting organizations. So the symbols remain consistent. The sunflower doesn't require someone to identify their disability. It simply communicates, I may have a hidden disability, chronic condition, illness. And it could also be, when you think about it, it can be a temporary condition as well. So the success of the program globally has been because it's a simple program. Once a business or an organization joins, they're supplied with a lot of additional resources and a very simple awareness video that can be accessed as well.
You answered my next question that I was going to ask, which is, once you sign up as a corporate member, or if you would like to implement the Sunflower, what is it that the organisation receives? What support do they receive? What training do they expect their staff to receive?
Great question. Okay, so there's different levels of membership, because we understand that it might even be like a mom and pop shop down the road that would like to become what we would call sunflower friendly. There are different levels of membership. There's a sole trader membership up to the corporate, which you and I had just referenced. Essentially what happens is it's an annual renewable subscription, and you're not only joining the local community of disability inclusion, you're also being part of the global network. So it blasts out across the internet around the fact that you are part of a global community that's supporting people with non-visible disabilities as well. Part of that subscription includes a SCORM file, which is essentially an awareness video that ideally sits on a learning management system. Now, that awareness video is less than 10 minutes long. It's people with lived experience speaking to camera, sharing their stories. And essentially what we're looking to do, Natalie, is raise awareness, right? Because we're a not-for-profit and we're already have been in the disability sector for 75 years, what we're attempting to accomplish is to make sure that the general public are aware that there are many challenges that people face day to day. And the Sunflower represents the fact that, hey, look, let's open the door or start that conversation, I should say.
From a workplace perspective, what's the experience in terms of how workplaces are adopting this? Because it's a slightly different program in terms of how you're creating awareness internally and the narrative that goes around that within workplaces than it would at an airport, for example. So
Correct.
Talk to us about the workplace implementation of the Sunflower and how your members have been using that internally.
Statistically, for all of your listeners, and perhaps this is a statistic that has been utilized in the past as well, but 1 in 5 Australians have a disability. And of that number, up to 90% now could potentially have a disability or non-visible medical condition. If you took that statistic and you extrapolated it across your workplace, you'd be awfully surprised to find out that there are probably potentially many people that perhaps could have a non-visible disability or require additional supports. And the only reason why you don't know that, or maybe there's a couple factors there, but you want to create an environment where people feel safe enough to arrive at work as their authentic selves. What happens in an environment where you utilize the sunflower? Now, keep in mind, we went from a conversation of customer experience where the focus was on the customer, the patient, the patron, the passenger. Now what we're going to do is we're going to shift our focus on people who are equally as important, if not more important, and that's the colleague-to-colleague support. So myself, in my own lived experience, I wear, and I'm going to describe it because we're on a podcast, but I'm wearing an ally supporter lanyard, but I'm also wearing the sunflower pin. And I'm late in life diagnosed ADHD. That realization helped me through many challenges that I can review over my 40 years of being in the workplace, in many different workplaces. And I find that the sunflower as a tool is a subtle reminder that not everybody is arriving at work in the same way. It's a conversation that may start with a manager to an employee, and it may be something that goes along the lines of this. Hey, Sandee, I noticed that you started to wear the sunflower. Is there anything that we can do to support the reason why you would be wearing a sunflower? Is there anything that you may need to support your work balance? Is there any accommodations that we can help you with? And what we find, and as you would know with all the research that you've done as well, is like what's good for one person is good for many. The difference, the shift between the customer experience model and the model of workplace is that not every day that I show up with a sunflower, or someone shows up with a sunflower, and you're not going to be bombarded with, how can I help you? How can I help you? It's a subtle indicator that person may need a bit more support. And it might be just something like, who knows, getting questions before a meeting or having the option. Okay, here's a great one. Having the option to shut my camera off in the middle of a meeting. And it's not just my camera, it could be anyone. Old school's workplace paradigm is you must have your camera on. There's so many rules and regulations and procedures that perhaps need to be revisited. And if it takes an initiative like the sunflower or perhaps a pathway like inclusive change and the wonderful work you're doing to open the dialogue and open the conversation to make that positive change within the workplace. And I think that's why we're here.
There's a few things that might be worth exploring a little bit further in what you've talked about. The first is the concept of empowerment. So you as a user of the sunflower determines how and when you use that. We know that disability is not necessarily stagnant. It doesn't show up the same way every day for a lot of people. And so dynamic disability is certainly one of those concepts that I think is quite closely related to what you described. But I guess the other thing that comes into my mind is potentially people listening to this conversation who are leaders in organisations may struggle with the concept of how then do I know how to support you? And if I am making accommodations to support you as a sunflower user, how do we communicate that to the team? How does that play out to the rest of the team? And then to your earlier point, psychological safety is so important for people to be able to even show up wearing a sunflower. Correct. And so I think it's important to acknowledge that in our conversation. What are your comments to leaders who are having those questions? Because they're certainly the questions I get asked all the time.
In a perfect world, you'd have leaders who would wear a sunflower and actually arrive at work as executive sponsors of a program that you're implementing within your business. That's starters. Secondly, it's starting the conversation with the person who's wearing the sunflower by asking them if they need any support. It's like anybody who's an employee in a business. There should be that conversation on a regular basis, right? The sunflower highlights that this employee potentially, if it's something that they've just started to wear. But here again, that's the importance of subscribing to the initiative, because once you subscribe, you gain access to what the sunflower represents. we have a recommended attrition, I guess I'd say, to have 80% of employees to actually watch the training. So they're aware of why someone could potentially wear a sunflower. Now, keeping in mind that it's not about uncovering what that person's disability is. And maybe people in culture and HR have another framework. I'm happy to, listen to rebuttals around where that might be an issue, where there might have to be the word disclosure. Disclosure is a bit like mandatory. You hear the word mandatory and everybody goes, oh gosh, we can't put that on and make it mandatory. And it's the same with disclosure. So this isn't about outing people. This isn't about disclosing. It's about engaging with people as human beings and realizing that they do have a job to do and they do have to be productive, and you've got your KPIs and you have all these things you have to do at work. But in order for people to evolve and to become a testimony to their own selves. And like the word you used, Nat, which I thought was amazing, is empowerment, right? You want your employees to feel empowered. And I stated this the other day, and I don't think I coined it, but I do have a saying that I've been leaning into of late. People add value when they feel valued. So when we go back to that whole psychological safety, when you create that environment, that workplace environment where people feel included. And it might be how I see it here in Australia and in New Zealand is a lot of times it's led by an employee resource group. And it might be led by a neurodivergent community of employees. But let's keep in mind, which I don't think I've mentioned this yet, there's over 950 non-visible disabilities.
Well, you see, that was my next point that I wrote down. There are over 900 on your website, and I think the last time I looked was 951. I'm sure it's growing.
And it could be situational, right? Like I've had 2 hip replacements. Maybe I jump on metro trains and I just need a little bit more support while I'm there. And I wear the sunflower as a temporary resource, as a communication tool. And we're not out. And again, I'm kind of a little bit on a tangent here, but back to the workplace thing. We're not out to create disability experts. We're out to create disability awareness and understanding and curiosity. Can we use the word? Let's stay curious. Let's learn from each other. And I think sometimes people are afraid of making mistakes. So they go, I don't know what I should ask. And actually it just starts with, why don't you share it with me?
Yeah.
Let's have a conversation. But it's not about ticking a box. When you start ticking boxes on me, you lose me.
So terminology, the word disability resonates with some people. People identify with it and many people don't. And I think it's just useful to call out that language and identities is incredibly personal. Again, that comes down to empowering people to be able to use the lanyard in a way that they see fit. Now, according to what you've described, I could have a lanyard and wear that to my workplace without the workplace actually sponsoring the program. I could choose to purchase a lanyard myself and wear it to work. Obviously, the better scenario is that the workplace goes through a fairly light education process, if I can be honest, in terms of this is what the program is about and making sure that there's good sponsorship and good allyship, which I think is the word you used earlier. But effectively, as an individual, I could do that. There's nothing stopping me from purchasing that lanyard and starting that conversation in my workplace if I feel psychologically safe to do so. Where does the program go from here? What are the kind of strategic imperatives of the program?
Future opportunity lies in moving beyond awareness. We're in the middle of a lovely campaign. It's a heart partnership with JC Decole.
Yes, I've seen that. I saw that.
And that's all about public awareness because there's 3 components. There's the wearer, there's the ally. Could be both, right? You could be an ally and a wearer at the same time. We already defined that. However, there's also the 3rd component, and that's the general public. So a symbol is only as powerful as people who are aware of it, right? So let's just say futuristic. We move beyond awareness and we embed inclusion into everyday experiences. And again, it's looking at sectors. For instance, key growth areas for us are the employment workplace inclusion, supporting employees with non-visible disability through psychologically safe workplaces, inclusive leadership and workplace adjustments, and aligning in partnership with organizations like yourself. So we have the ability to share information to say, look, if you want to do a deep dive into XYZ, align, because right now the sunflower, as you just stated, represents so many non-visible medical conditions conditions and disabilities. Maybe it's a month where someone's featuring a specific condition or disability. It's a perfect time to utilize the sunflower as a symbol for that disability or medical condition and do a deep dive. We have tools on our website as well as resources that can be shared out onto an intranet. That's where I've seen the biggest impact in workplaces is when the intranet is reflective of the employees. So you actually have people with lived experience that become sunflower advocates within the workplace, and they feel comfortable enough to share their experiences. So the future key areas are also in healthcare for us. We'd like to improve patient experiences in education, embedding awareness within schools, university, vocational education settings to support students and educators. We have a beautiful video of a faculty member from Vic Uni who we utilize in our overviews when we do lunch and learns and workshops. That particular teacher, faculty member, is a sunflower wearer, and she explains quite eloquently what her day-to-day life is and how relatable she is when she walks into the classroom with a sunflower lanyard. She sometimes gets high fives. And then, of course, it's just reiterating the building, the public understanding. And also, you know what else I'd like to see is integrating the sunflower into online services and customer support channels. Much to what I was saying earlier around shutting my camera off. Let's just say I'm in a team environment and I shut my camera off. I can utilize the sunflower as an icon to indicate that perhaps I just need a bit of time.
I'm going to round off with retail, because I know it's one that's we've talked about a lot. Which retailers, Australia, New Zealand, if you have access to that information, because I've kind of thrown the question at you, but which retailers are part of the cohort now?
Okay, so we've had a wonderful reception by bricks and mortar. And what I mean by bricks and mortar is I'm talking about your center groups, your Westfields, your vicinity centers, your Fraser property group. So the actual building itself, there's interest in joining the initiative. 9 times out of 10, the concierge desk is the go-to for those sorts of businesses. We have some early onboarders in retail. So for instance, early onboarders are businesses like Kmart. And they're all on their journey, right? So there's a difference between joining the initiative and announcing to the public that you're sunflower friendly. And there's a risk associated with that. So we're happy to announce when retailers on board as we've started our journey, et cetera, but we want to ensure that there has been due diligence around, at the bare minimum, watching the awareness video and then having the pins, the I support pins, utilized for staff members who've watched the training, because it works in twofold. One, it works as a visual indicator that I've watched the training and I can support you. We're talking about retail. So as a customer, I'm here to support, because maybe there's customers that don't want to wear sunflowers, and that's fine too. And it's also an acknowledgement of training as well. So we're well and truly on our path with businesses like Bupa. We have done a lot of work with other businesses who have larger organizations who have chosen to utilize the program as a workplace initiative first before going out to customers as well. Because I think there needs to be that understanding of the purpose of the initiative prior to and support of one another prior to going out and assisting customers. So I'd like to also, from a retail standpoint, I'd like to give a shout out to David Jones as well. What I loved about David Jones's implementation is they actually took our framework, our implementation plan, and they adopted it as their own with their own logo on the front of the implementation plan, and then further set up the timeline, chose a date in the future that they wanted to shoot for regarding training and et cetera, and then set up some really great activities that were employee bonding as well, which were groups getting together to kind of train the trainer, I suppose would be, and attending lunch and learns, et cetera. So with fear of leaving someone out, I'm so blessed.
Well, amazing. And certainly I've sat on the sidelines and sometimes become more heavily involved, but I've watched this grow, and I wish Bailey House and I wish your team all the success in creating more impact. And, you know, I think the fact of the matter is that there are always elements that can improve and can be done better. And that's the same with every program and every implementation I've been involved with. But as you said, the most important aspect of this is having a really genuine change narrative around why this program is important to you as a business, why it's important to you as a workplace, why it's important to you as your customers. And if you can start there, then I think the rest follows.
Yeah,
so
always start with your why, Nat. And also perhaps getting an understanding of what your employees want as well by communicating out to them, not because you're trying to complete a survey, but because you really want to define that why. So it's not just important for the brand, but it's important for the people who represent the brand because they're essentially an extension. When you work for XYZ, that employee becomes an extension of that brand. So why not make that the heart and the center of what you do every day? And starting with the why is important. But keep in mind, it is, and I've said this before, the sunflower is the icing on the cake. And what you put in the cake mix is the important work that's done by businesses like Inclusive Change and other peak bodies and not-for-profits. So we're one big holistic, I guess, family per se, network that's here to support businesses improve. And another little comment, it's about progress, not perfection. You got to start somewhere. So you start low cost, high return, get your foot in the door, get started with these sorts of inclusive and accessibility programs. Go from there.
And you go from there.
Yeah,
absolutely.
yeah.
Agree. Well, it's been a pleasure having you on, and no doubt we will be chatting again very soon. But it's been amazing to watch the program grow, and thank you so much for coming on Open Wired.
I appreciate the invitation, and I thank you for your advocacy.
If you found value in today's chat, the best way to support the podcast is to share it with a colleague. Make sure you hit follow or subscribe wherever you're listening. And I'm always eager to hear your takeaways, so do drop me a DM on Instagram at Inclusive Change or send me an email. All the links to connect with me and to learn more about today's guests are waiting for you in the episode description. Thanks again for being here, and I'll catch you next time.